Have you ever noticed how that first sip of tea in the morning sometimes leaves a weird, slightly metallic film on the roof of your mouth, or a bitter aftertaste that you just try to drown in another splash of semi-skimmed milk? What if I told you that the comforting British ritual you repeat 4, 5, 6 times a day isn't actually a peaceful moment of calm, but a steady dose of industrial debris and banned chemicals? Think about it. You roll out of bed, flick the kettle on, pop a standard square bag into your favorite mug, and wait for that deep, comforting amber color to bloom. You think you're looking at premium leaves releasing their natural essence. In reality, you might be looking at an engineered illusion, watching a cocktail of factory dust and microscopic heat-sealed glue dissolve into your morning brew. We've been conditioned to think that tea is just a leaf in some paper, a harmless national habit, as innocent as talking about the weather. But the reality behind the supermarket shelves is far darker, and it's time we had a proper chat about what you're actually swallowing. By the time we're done today, you'll find out exactly which household name brands are packing your bags with leftovers and floor sweepings instead of real tea. I'll show you the independent laboratory data that caught famous British staples red-handed with a terrifying number of pesticide residues, including some that were banned decades ago. We'll break down the sneaky packaging tricks that allow companies to claim they are green while still leaking billions of synthetic particles straight into your boiling water. And most importantly, we will save the absolute worst for last, exposing the single most popular global tea product that is effectively serving you a liquid chemistry experiment under the guise of premium heritage. Once you see how the industry has systematically degraded the nation's favorite drink to protect their profit margins, you will know more than 90% of shoppers in the supermarket aisle. And you'll never look at a standard box of Builder's tea the same way again. Before we name and shame the culprits sitting in your kitchen cupboards right now, we need to understand how a proper brew is actually supposed to work, because the tea industry has pulled off the ultimate magic trick right under our noses. See, a real tea leaf is like a complex, slow-burning fuel. When it's whole and intact, it holds onto its essential oils, its natural sweetness, and its delicate aromas. When you pour hot water over whole leaves, they slowly unfurl, like a premium engine warming up, releasing a deep nuanced flavor over several minutes. It takes time, but the result is smooth, balanced, and completely free of that harsh, throat-stripping bitterness. But time is money for multinational corporations, and they realized a long time ago that the modern British consumer has been trained to want a dark mug of tea in precisely 20 seconds flat. So, how do you make tea release its color instantly? You smash the leaves to pieces. You grind them down until they aren't leaves anymore, but a hyperfine powder known in the trade as fannings and dust. Think of it like comparing a solid block of wood to a pile of sawdust. If you drop a match on a log, it burns slowly and evenly. If you throw a handful of sawdust into a fire, it explodes in a flash of heat and smoke. That is exactly what happens in your mug. The tea dust exposes a massive surface area to the boiling water, dumping all its color and harsh tannins instantly. It gives you the illusion of a strong, proper brew, but it's completely hollow. It has no depth, no complexity, just a bitter punch that forces you to reach for the sugar bowl. And it gets worse, because once you've reduced the tea to a fine dust, you can't just let it float around loose, or the consumer will choke on it. You need a container, and that's where the modern tea bag comes in. To keep those tiny, microscopic dust particles from escaping into your water, the paper needs to be incredibly fine, and the seams have to be sealed tight. Traditional paper isn't strong enough to withstand boiling water on its own without turning into mush, so the industry started blending synthetic polymers right into the paper fibers or using plastic glues to heat seal the edges. They created a convenient, indestructible little pouch that holds together perfectly in your mug, but at a massive cost to your health. When you pour boiling water onto a synthetic polymer, you are creating the perfect environment for chemical leaching. It's an industrial shortcut masquerading as a household helper, designed entirely to keep the high-speed production lines moving. They took a natural therapeutic botanical ritual and turned it into a fast-paced commodity system driven by uniformity and cost-cutting. Every part of the process has been optimized for the corporate balance sheet, not for the person drinking the final cup. And the funniest part is, they spend millions of pounds on advertising to make sure you keep visualizing rolling green hills and traditional craftsmanship, while their factories are busy processing agricultural leftovers. We've been completely played, mates, and it's time to start looking at the hard evidence. Let's start pulling back the box lids on the stuff you've probably got sitting in your larder right now, and we'll kick off with a brand that prides itself on being the down-to-earth choice for the everyday working man. Tetley. Owned by the massive global conglomerate Tata Consumer Products, Tetley has spent decades building an image of friendly, reliable comfort, using those classic cartoon tea folk to convince us they're just old mates making an honest brew. But if you look past the nostalgia, the actual science behind their bags tells a completely different story. Tetley publicly admits that their standard everyday tea bags are not completely plastic-free, hiding behind the clever phrasing that they are 99% biodegradable. That sounds great on a supermarket shelf, but that remaining 1% is made of a synthetic heat-seal polymer, a plastic glue used to stop the bag from bursting open in your mug. When you multiply that single percent across the tens of millions of bags Tetley pumps out every single day into British kitchens, you realize we are looking at an absolute torrent of synthetic microparticles entering the nation's hot water. And what about the tea inside? Independent laboratory testing by groups like CBC Marketplace sent major brands to accredited facilities, and Tetley's results were genuinely shocking, revealing the presence of 22 different pesticide residues inside a single tea bag. These are chemicals designed to wipe out insects, fungi, and weeds, and they are steeping directly into your morning drink. The corporate defense is always the same, that the level of each individual chemical falls safely below the legal limit. But here is the massive catch that the regulators completely ignore. No one has ever done the long-term safety mathematics on what happens when you combine 22 different toxins into a single hot liquid cocktail inside the human body. To make matters worse, one of the chemicals detected in these tests was monocrotophos, a heavy-duty agricultural poison that has been banned in several Western countries for years due to its extreme toxicity. Yet it still manages to find its way onto British grocery shelves through global supply loops. Research from the University of East Anglia even flagged Tetley as releasing the highest volume of microplastic fragments among several major supermarket brands tested. It's not a comforting craft brew, it's a high-speed industrial product that trades your peace of mind for a quick, cheap infusion. If that makes you want to go and double-check your own kitchen cupboards, hit that subscribe button right now, because the deeper we dig into these household staples, the harsher the reality gets. Let's move on to another absolute giant of the British High Street, PG Tips. For generations, this was the undisputed king of the corporate tea break, famous for its bold strength and that iconic pyramid shape that promised to give the leaves room to move. A few years ago, PG Tips made a massive song and dance in the media about switching to 100% plant-based bags, swapping out old-school plastics for a corn-derived material called PLA. It sounded like a massive victory for the environment, but what they didn't put in the big, bold print on the box is that PLA is only industrially compostable. If you throw that bag into your standard home compost bin in the garden, it doesn't just magically vanish. It sits there, behaving almost exactly like the traditional plastic it replaced, because it requires specialized commercial heat levels to break down properly. Ever since these changes and various corporate restructures took place, loyal British consumers have flooded online review spaces with bitter complaints about the taste. People are pointing out that the brew feels incredibly weak, flat, and watery compared to the punchy cuppa they grew up with some shoppers claiming they now need to use 2 bags just to get a decent color and flavor. This happens because the brand relies heavily on ultra-fine fannings and dust, the absolute cheapest leftover particles from the mechanical sorting process. It creates a dark look in seconds, giving you the visual illusion of strength. But underneath that quick color, the actual flavor profile is completely hollow. It took a public petition signed by over 200,000 angry British consumers to push the brand into changing its materials in the first place, proving that major corporations rarely act out of genuine care until their sales figures take a massive £15 million hammering, which is exactly what happened when shoppers started voting with their wallets. Then we have Yorkshire Tea, the brand that people in this country will genuinely defend with their entire personality. It has become an absolute cultural identity, a cult-like status where people swear it's the only proper gold standard brew left on Earth. But behind that lovely, wholesome packaging showing rolling green hills and traditional village life, Yorkshire Tea is operating within the exact same global commodity system as the cheap budget brands. For years, they've faced intense public pressure to remove plastic sealants from their products, and while they have made transitions toward plant-based alternatives, older stock and various elements of their vast supply chains have kept consumers guessing about what is actually leaching into their boiling water. Their raw leaves don't come from some independent, idyllic garden in the north of England. They are imported from massive commercial plantations in Kenya, Assam, and Sri Lanka, where international human rights investigations have repeatedly raised serious concerns over low wages, brutal overwork, and regular worker exposure to toxic agricultural sprays. In fact, Yorkshire Tea's parent company had to publicly answer for a supplier in Malawi that faced severe allegations regarding working conditions. The company argues that they audit their sources, but when you are blending and shipping millions of boxes a week to satisfy every major supermarket chain from Tesco to Morrison's, true oversight becomes a corporate impossibility. That famous Yorkshire strength isn't a sign of artisan quality, it's the result of heavy engineering using a specific blend of tiny fannings designed to release tannins fast enough to cut through the hard water found in British taps. They even admitted that their outer protective packaging contained standard plastic wrapping. You aren't buying an authentic piece of British heritage. You are buying a highly optimized global commodity wrapped in excellent, cozy marketing. Now look at Twinings. This brand carries a royal warrant, boasts a historic shop on the Strand that dates back to the 1700s, and charges a premium price that makes you think you are buying elite luxury. But look at those perfectly white, pristine square bags. Leaves aren't naturally that pure white, and neither is raw paper. Twinings uses an intense oxygen bleaching process on their paper fibers just to get that spotless, uniform look purely for cosmetic presentation on the shelf. The company claims it's a clean process, but the real question is why any consumer should tolerate chemical whiteners in their morning cup just to satisfy a corporate aesthetic design. When you look inside their standard everyday blend, you don't find the beautiful whole leaves suggested by their historic heritage image. You find the exact same fine fannings and dust used by the budget options. It brews quickly, but it completely abandons the natural aromas and subtle complexities that made traditional loose tea famous. In 2019, Twinings was dragged into a massive legal dispute over claims that their tea, marketed as completely pure and natural, contained detectable residues of glyphosate, the active chemical used in heavy-duty weed killers. Consumer advocacy groups in Europe, including the prominent French organization 16 Million Consumers, have backed this up by finding persistent pesticide traces across their product lines. To make it even worse for the British workforce, Twinings quietly shifted a massive portion of its traditional manufacturing away from the UK over to factories in Poland and China, shutting down local operations while continuing to use British history to justify a premium price at the checkout. You are paying double the price for a royal warrant and a fancy box, while getting the same industrially processed dust as the cheapest box on the floor. Let's not forget Typhoo, a brand that has been around since 1903 and represents a tragic case study in corporate neglect. Once a staple of the British breakfast table, Typhoo has spent the last decade being passed around like a bad debt between various financial owners who cared far more about asset stripping and aggressive cost-cutting than the quality of the leaves. At one point, the brand was taken over by a company primarily famous for manufacturing disposable vape products and e-cigarettes. By the time the brand entered administration in 2024, consumers were leaving horrific reviews online, reporting that their tea tasted bizarrely metallic, bitter, and in some shocking cases, explicitly like rotting fish. That is what happens when a brand is in a financial tailspin, quality control is completely abandoned, sourcing is shifted to the lowest bidder on the global market, and the consumer ends up drinking the literal dregs of a dying business. Then you have the standard supermarket-owned brands like Sainsbury's Red Label. There's no massive dramatic corporate scandal here, it's just aggressively, offensively mediocre. When the consumer group, which conducted independent blind taste tests, Sainsbury's Red Label dragged in a thoroughly uninspiring score of 71%. It is the tea equivalent of blank, grey wallpaper, utterly functional, totally devoid of character, and blended down to a price point so that the supermarket can maximize its profit margins on people who buy it entirely out of comfort and habit. Tesco Original performed even worse, locking down a dismal 67% in the exact same testing, which put it dead last alongside Twinings. Think about that for a second. A basic budget bag from Tesco performed exactly as well as a brand that charges 3 times the price for its royal heritage. Tesco has the massive global buying power and infrastructure to source clean, high-quality leaves without raising prices. But they simply choose not to because they know millions of busy shoppers will grab that familiar blue box purely because it's cheap and it happens to be right in front of them. Every time you buy these low-tier dust bags, you are directly financing an industrial system that values speed, chemical uniformity, and corporate efficiency over the simple health of the nation. And now, mates, we get to what it was actually worth watching all the way through for. We've waded through the industrial sludge, the chemical residues, and the cynical marketing traps. So let's talk about the rewards. Let's look at the brands that are actually respecting the nation's favorite daily ritual by doing things properly. The energy changes completely here, because these options prove you don't have to surrender your morning comfort to a corporate chemistry experiment. You can walk into standard British high street shops right now and find tea that won't compromise your health. And we are going to start with a brand that absolutely sets the benchmark for everyday bags. Cuppa. Based down in Dorset, Cuppa started with a fiercely independent philosophy centered on keeping things entirely natural, clean, and fair. They became the UK's first fair trade tea company, and they hold an official B Corp certification, which means they are legally required to prioritize social and environmental good over raw, predatory profit margins. When you look at a Cuppa bag, you immediately notice something different. It isn't that brilliant, chemical-bleached laundry white. It's a softer, unbleached, rustic brown color because they completely refuse to subject their paper to cosmetic chemical washing. More importantly, their bags are sealed using an entirely natural, non-genetically modified biomaterial derived from plant cellulose. There is no petroleum-based polypropylene plastic glue holding the seams together, meaning when you douse it in boiling water, you aren't creating a synthetic soup. In the cup, the difference from the big-name bad options is like night and day. Cuppa uses real, properly sourced whole leaf fragments rather than factory floor dust. Because it's real tea, the flavor doesn't just slam your palate with a bitter punch in 5 seconds flat. It develops slowly, smoothly, and naturally over 3 to 4 minutes, giving you a deep, authentic, malty richness that actually tastes like tea instead of processed wood. Price-wise, it sits slightly higher than the bargain basement budget boxes, usually costing around 4 pence per mug, depending on supermarket promotions. But every extra penny goes directly into clean sourcing and legitimate fair wages for workers, rather than a multi-million-pound corporate television ad campaign. Once you make the switch to a proper Cuppa brew, your palate adapts. And going back to standard industrial dust bags feels like drinking dishwater. Next up on the list is Hampstead Tea, which is the gold standard for anyone looking for the highest possible ethical and ecological purity in a mainstream grocery product. Hampstead Tea regularly locks down the absolute #1 ranking from the independent consumer watchdog Ethical Consumer, blowing the mass-market brands completely out of the water. Their philosophy revolves entirely around biodynamic farming, an advanced form of organic cultivation that treats the entire tea estate as a self-sustaining living ecosystem. Every single batch is fully traceable right back to the specific field it was plucked from, and they openly publish their independent laboratory testing results to prove their leaves are entirely free from herbicides, heavy metals, and agricultural sprays. When you brew a cup of their organic Assam or Earl Grey, you physically see and smell the difference before the liquid even touches your lips. The aroma is intensely clean and botanical, completely lacking that heavy, chemical-tinged bitterness that characterizes industrial leftovers. It feels remarkably clean on the skin of your tongue, leaving a refreshing, slightly sweet aftertaste that doesn't require a mountain of sugar to mask. Now, let's be completely honest about the downside. It is more expensive, often running closer to 6 or 7 pence a serving, and it can be slightly harder to spot in standard small local corner shops, meaning you usually need to hunt for it in larger Sainsbury's, Waitrose, or online via Ocado. But if your budget allows for it and you want absolute certainty that zero chemicals or plastic glues are entering your family's bodies, this is the definitive premium option. Then we have Pukka, which comes with a massive, fascinating caveat that every British shopper needs to understand. Pukka built its massive reputation as an independent, Bristol-based champion of herbal and green tea purity. In fact, that exact same independent research project at the University of East Anglia discovered that Pukka's traditional stitched bags were among the absolute cleanest, releasing 0 synthetic microplastic particles into the water because they avoid heat-sealed chemical glues entirely, opting instead for a simple traditional organic cotton string stitch. Their organic credentials are completely legitimate, and their blends are packed with high-grade botanical ingredients rich in natural essential oils. However, the big twist happened when Pukka was swallowed up by Unilever, the exact same multinational corporate giant behind Lipton. While Pukka's packaging still displays all the lovely independent organic and fair trade badges, loyal consumers have noted various subtle adjustments in flavor profiles and formulation consistency since the mega conglomerate integrated the brand into its massive global distribution networks. It remains a visually beautiful, plastic-free and clean product on the shelf, but you need to go into it with your eyes wide open, knowing that your money is ultimately flowing into the same corporate boardroom that profits off mass-market shortcuts. Now, let's flip the script completely and look at an option for the budget-conscious shopper that completely shatters the myth that you need a royal warrant to get a decent cup. Asda Everyday Tea Bags. When the consumer group Which ran their intensive, unbiased blind taste testing panels, this incredibly cheap, no-nonsense supermarket own brand pulled off a massive upset, scoring an impressive 72%. It systematically beat out Twinings at 67%, Yorkshire Tea at 70%, and PG Tips at 71%. It is absolute proof that when you buy those premium household names, you are paying a massive premium just to fund their marketing departments, while a basics supermarket brand can actually source a more balanced, drinkable blend for a fraction of the cost. At less than a penny per serving, Asda Everyday is an absolute steal for a standard, hard-hitting builder's brew. But in the spirit of total honesty, it has one major notorious flaw that floods their customer review sections: the structural integrity of the bags is absolute rubbish. Shoppers consistently report that the paper is so thin and poorly joined that the bags regularly split, burst, and disintegrate the moment boiling water hits them, leaving your mug floating with loose debris and forcing you to fish out the remains. It's a brilliant, highly rated blend trapped inside a fundamentally weak container, making it a bit of a gamble every time you flick the kettle on. Finally, we arrive at the absolute ultimate option, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world that makes every single tea bag look like a lazy compromise: loose leaf tea. This is exactly how your grandparents made a brew back in the 1960s, before big food corporations convinced the nation that we were too busy to use a strainer. Moving to loose leaf completely eliminates every single systemic issue we've talked about today. There are no bleached papers, no hidden plastic heat seals, no corn-derived polymers that won't degrade, and zero microplastic particles leaking into your body. It is just pure, unadulterated botanical leaves and water. Because the leaves are kept completely whole and intact rather than ground into mechanical dust, they release their complex natural flavors gradually over time, giving you a smooth, deeply satisfying cup that is completely free of that harsh, bitter throat-stripping quality found in standard bags. You can buy high-quality organic loose-leaf tea from almost every major British supermarket shelf, or direct from independent local tea merchants for roughly the same cost per month as premium bags, because you aren't paying for the massive mechanical manufacturing process of individual pouching. It takes 30 seconds longer to rinse out a traditional teapot or an infuser basket, but in return, you get total health safety, an elite flavor profile, and you completely opt out of the corporate deception matrix. Now that you know exactly who is playing games with your health and who is actually respecting the nation's favorite brew, let's lock down some concrete, unbreakable rules so you can shop with absolute confidence next time you walk down the hot drinks aisle at Tesco or Sainsbury's. Treat these as your personal supermarket shield against corporate marketing fluff, and feel free to take a mental screenshot right now. Rule number 1. Flip the box over and look for the specific phrase "unbleached bags." If the packaging praises how bright, pure, and flawlessly white the material is, but completely leaves out the word "unbleached," walk away, because you are paying for a cosmetic chemical wash designed purely for shelf aesthetics. Rule number 2. Check the fine print for the words plastic-free or plant-based cellulose heat seal, and actively avoid vague claims like 99% biodegradable, which is a massive corporate red flag, indicating that synthetic polypropylene glue is holding the seams together. Rule number 3. If a box of standard square bags doesn't explicitly state that it uses whole leaf or large leaf fragments, you can be absolutely certain you are buying heavily processed industrial fannings and floor sweepings, designed to dump bitter tannins into your mug within 20 seconds. Rule number 4, check for independent organic certifications like the Soil Association badge, because that is your only legal guarantee that the leaves haven't been heavily sprayed with a toxic cocktail of agricultural pesticides that are banned in other parts of the world. Rule number 5, always check the country of origin or the sourcing transparency statement, because if a premium brand hides behind vague phrases like blended in the UK from multiple origins without naming the specific estates, they are likely sourcing the cheapest possible commodity crops from high-risk industrial plantations. Rule number 6. Look for the official B Corp logo on the side of the box, which legally binds the company to verify their ethical supply chains, worker conditions, and material safety, so you know your money isn't funding exploitation abroad. Rule number 7. When in doubt, completely bypass the boxes of convenient pouches altogether and look for the simple loose leaf bags sitting on the lower or top shelves, which completely guarantees you are getting 0 plastics, 0 glues, and 0 chemical whiteners. When you sum up everything we've uncovered today, the entire mass-market British tea industry is built on a single cynical foundation: trading your long-term health and the genuine quality of your daily ritual for high-speed factory efficiency and cheap convenience. They ground our historic national drink down into a hyperfine, bitter dust, wrapped it in synthetic polymers and chemical-bleached papers, and then spent hundreds of millions of pounds on cozy, comforting television adverts to make sure we never questioned the liquid experiment sitting in our mugs. But the moment you make that one simple shift in your shopping thinking, the moment you stop buying into the nostalgic heritage stories and start demanding clean materials and real whole leaves, the entire marketing illusion completely falls apart and you take back control of your kitchen. I want to say a massive thank you for spending your valuable time with me today, digging up the truth. And if this investigation helped pull back the curtain on what's really lurking inside your pantry, please do me a massive favor and share this video with a mate or a family member who easily drinks 5 or 6 cups of standard builder's tea every single day without a single second thought. Drop me a comment right down below and let me know completely honestly which of these exact brands is sitting in your kitchen cupboard right now, and which consumer product should we send to the lab for a proper investigative breakdown. Next, we are going to keep pulling back the labels, we are going to keep exposing the corporate shortcuts, and we are going to keep demanding much higher standards for what goes onto our plates and into our bodies. Until next time, keep your wits about you in the supermarket aisle, read the fine print, and protect your plate.